What if the most powerful form of leadership isn't just what you say, but how you help others find their voice? Today's guest, JGo Gordon, has taught, led, performed, and built, and every step of the way, he's made space for people to be seen, heard, and connected. This episode is about story, strategy, and the human need to belong. Welcome to Beyond the Pattern, Life and Leadership Unlocked. I'm your host, Bukalo Gintala, keynote speaker, HR strategist, and leadership coach with over 20 years of experience supporting leaders through growth and transition. I'm also a first-generation Nigerian American. My name, Bukala, means added to the greatness in Yoruba, and this podcast is one way I live that out. We're living in a time of constant acceleration. AI, automation, and performance culture push us to go faster and do more. But speed isn't the same as wisdom, and going fast doesn't mean we're moving forward. That's why I created this space to reclaim the human side of leadership. If you want to stay connected, be sure to follow the show and hit subscribe wherever you're listening. That way you won't miss any episode when it drops every other week. Whether this is your first time listening or you've been following since day one, I'm so glad you're here. Let's get into it. Welcome to Beyond the Pattern, Life and Leadership Unlocked, where we explore the beliefs, stories, and habits, conscious and unconscious, that shape how we lead, grow, and connect. I'm your host, Bukalo Gintala, and this podcast is a space for reflection and realignment, a chance to ask, are the patterns I'm following still serving me, or is it time for something new? Our guest today lives at the intersection of insight and imagination. Whether he's in a classroom, on a stage, or building new ventures, he's always working to unlock human potential through connection, creativity, and courage. JGo Gordon is a captivating storyteller and dynamic speaker who draws from a deep well of experience as an educator, entrepreneur, entertainer, and explorer. With degrees from Yale and Columbia, JGo has taught everything from economics to theater in classrooms across the country and around the world. He served as a teacher, a principal, a senior strategist in the education tech world, and is currently the co-founder of Written Out Loud, an entrepreneurial venture dedicated to amplifying voices through storytelling. He's also graced world-renowned stages like the Kennedy Center, Carnegie Hall, blending performance and presence in ways that leave lasting impact. At the heart of all of his work is a powerful commitment to create spaces of belonging and transformation where people feel empowered to bring their full selves forward. JGo, welcome to Beyond the Pattern.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Awesome. I'm excited to be here. Really excited. Thank you for having me.
Good. Thank you. Now, I did my best to capture your background in a bio, but I want to make sure I didn't leave anything out. So is there anything you want to add, or is there anything you want to update or correct that I said wrong?
That sounds great. I mean,
Oh,
it
okay.
makes me sound like I'm flying all over the world on crazy stages and things like that. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. And just, before we get into it, let's tell the audience how they can get a hold of you. Let's just go ahead and put that out there before we forget. If they want to
Yeah,
connect with
sure.
you, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, jgospeaks.com, jgospeaks.com. That's the best way to get a hold of me. You can see all of the current stuff that I'm up to, and you can send me an email there as well. So, yeah, that's the best place.
So now your journey crosses so many fields: education, entertainment, entrepreneurship. When you think back to your early years, what kinds of patterns or themes showed up in how you learned or led?
You're right. I'm sort of a jack of all trades, I guess you might call me. And that started really early. Unfortunately, the origins of that are not all fun and games. I grew up in an abusive household, and I realized that the more time I spent at school, the less time I had to spend at home. So I played every sport, I joined all the clubs, and I looked for every excuse that I could to do stuff at school and to do different types of things. And that has served me well because it has made me truly a lifelong learner and truly interested in just about everything that comes my way. I just want to do lots of different things.
Mhm.
And that has really served me throughout my career to not be afraid of change, to not be afraid of trying new things. That's what I'm still doing to this day.
Got it. Got it. And what helped you recognize that storytelling and learning were always going to be part of your path?
I think that, like I said, from a young age, I had stories to tell. And when I was young, I wasn't telling those stories that I alluded to earlier. But I realized that communicating with other people and connecting with other people was really at the core of what made me feel safe, what made me feel like I belonged, and what made me feel like I could do things that maybe otherwise I thought I couldn't do. So I learned from a very early age that communicating is storytelling. And without intentionally realizing it, I began to hone my abilities as a storyteller very young.
Wow. Okay. Do you recall like the moment it became clear to you, the storytelling and just the use of, language to communicate as an area of focus?
There was a point, I mentioned that I lived in an abusive household. So I was adopted fairly young, within the first year of my life, by a white woman. And by all common measures, that woman turned out to be racist. We had a really, really difficult time, especially in my preteen years, where I started to be a little bit more rebellious. And I noticed that there were things that she was saying that didn't really jive with my view of the world. And there was one day where she was upset with me. I rebelled and got on my bike and went to a friend's house. And remember, this is before cell phones and that type of thing. So if you wanted to get a hold of me, you kind of had to come find me, which she did. And so I remember it was a stormy day. It was really rainy. I got into the car. She left my bike behind and she was yelling at me, which was not uncommon. But then she said, "You owe me. You need me because every Black person in this world needs a white person if they want to become anything." That was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, that made me realize that if I wanted to be somebody, I didn't need to rely on that white person or any person, that I needed to do it myself, which actually caused some issues later because then I had this, I got to do everything myself type of attitude. Sometimes I think of it as the moment between my childhood and actually growing up.
Yeah.
But I think it was also the moment that I realized that those connections that I had been making, those were going to be much more important than I even realized.
Wow. Wow. No, thank you for sharing that. For me, hearing that story, I mean, I can't even imagine. I mean, my stepfather was white. Well, he still is. And and there were definitely things that came up, but there wasn't that direct of a ownership of that. It was more implied, it was more maybe suggested, but and there's room for interpretation. But what you described sounds so direct. And you were how old when that happened?
I believe I was 12 years old when that
12.
happened.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it
Yeah.
was my eighth grade year.
Got
So
it. Got
yeah,
it.
it would have been 12 years old.
And so by that point, had you already been exposed to other kind of language like that or
Yeah, absolutely. So
direct? Yeah.
I was born in Ohio in a neighborhood that was pretty segregated, but at school I had my Black friends, I had my white friends, I had my Asian friends, etc. But then in fifth grade, we moved to New Hampshire, and this was part of, I think, my parents trying to reconcile their marriage, which ended very quickly after moving to New Hampshire. And that's really when a lot of the abuse began. But as you might imagine, as, a young Black kid trying to grow up and navigate through the White Mountains, literally the White Mountains, I had all kinds, I mean, we don't have time to get into all the stories that I have about, just going to the local Kmart and, and having little kids come up to me and say, "Are you a nigger?" Like those types of things. So it wasn't like I was, this was new to me.
Right.
But, I do think, you talked about it being direct. And in some ways, I think that directness was a gift. And I definitely have learned from that. That's one of the things that I bring to my leadership style. I try to be as direct with people as possible because all the other stuff is just noise that gets in the way of what you're actually trying to do.
Yeah.
So in that moment, even though it was very, very painful, no child wants to give up on their parents. Even though it was painful, it was a very important moment. And in some ways, I am grateful that she was direct because it made it very clear to me what I needed to do from that moment forward.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much about the man you are today that I've experienced
Mm,
that to hear the background that has shaped who you are, I mean, it's mind blowing to me.
mm.
What did you tell yourself in the moment to kind of move on and hold on to some respect? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm the oldest child in that family. And then about 3.5 years later, my sister was adopted. My sister is white. And so I grew up being the only person of color in the family, in the whole family. And I think wasn't really aware of that too much until I went to school and I realized that there were some kids who would talk to me certain ways and some kids who would talk to me other ways. And I began to understand or at least acknowledge that race was a thing in grade school. When I got older and started experiencing more of the abuse, both physical and mental, I realized that my younger sister, again, who was white, was also experiencing that in different ways. So, for example, I think my sister would be okay with me sharing this. My sister's biological parents were very, very young. My parents were very young as well, 17 and 20, I believe. But hers were even younger than that. 14, I think, was her mother. And so I began to see some of the verbal attacks that my younger sister got that obviously had nothing to do with race, had to do with her biological mother or whatever the thing was. And that helped me actually to realize that it wasn't about race, right? And
And
it
it wasn't
wasn't
about
about,
you. And it wasn't about
it
you.
wasn't about me, exactly. It was about this person who had a lot of anger and a lot of ignorance and misunderstanding about how the world worked. And so I began to make some of the connections and draw some of the lines there. And it's interesting because, again, that direct communication style that she had, on the one hand, it was very useful for me to cut out some of the noise and really know what she's talking about. And on the other hand, it actually helped me see that that kind of direct communication can be really harmful in a situation. And so, you mentioned that what you know of me may be direct, but it is also very loving.
Mhm.
And some of why I am that way today, I think comes from that I'm trying to correct the mistakes of my parents or of my elders. But I also think that, when I needed help, I luckily had people, whether they were teachers or friends or my father, who, they got divorced, but he still remained a champion of mine. I saw the compassion that they gave to me. And I really wanted to model that. And I thought there could be a better way to still have that. Let's talk about exactly what's going on, but let's doing it in a loving and a caring and a belonging way,
Yeah.
a compassionate way where everyone can feel good about the reality.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go on too much, but it's exactly like why I do what I do today
Yeah.
is to speak about belonging because I feel like more and more every year, society gets further and further away from that sense of can you have directness and also compassion at the same time. In fact, a lot of people say to me, like they don't understand how I can lead this way, right? They say, "Oh, you're showing you're being too vulnerable or too trusting with your employees, etc." But I think it's just the opposite. I think that if I show them that I really do trust them and I can be my authentic selves with them, that's not weakness, that's realness.
Mhm.
And that earns the trust. And I'm only as strong as my employees in a situation, or as my students when I was a teacher, or as my family, right? That's as strong as I can be because I understand that we all have to go through this together. And
Yeah.
so if I can let them know that and I can create situations where they really feel that, then that does make me a strong leader, not because I speak directly or I'm authoritative or I, know exactly how things are going to go, but because I really am encompassing all of the strengths and talents and hopes and dreams of whoever it is that I'm working with.
Wow. Wow. JGo. Oh man, thank you for sharing that. As you described some of your coaches and your experiences in sports, I can relate to that. I was a young athlete. My coaches were like my dads.
Hmm.
And yeah, like to this day, I praise God for them. And so I guess I'm trying to understand more of once you started a career in education, even a principal, now you're in a leadership position and you've seen what's been role modeled for you as a young child and your values are coming together. Like, can you talk with us about some of your evolution as an
Yeah.
educator, starting out versus over time? I mean, I know from my friends who are educators, it's not a joke, it's not a joke. And
Yeah.
and it can humble you in different ways. But yeah, can you talk to us about how, your approach as a leader at the beginning of your education career versus how it evolved, yeah, over time?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I kind of stumbled into education. I was hoping to be a musician. So I got out of college and I moved to New York City and I was living the dream. And then probably my biggest problem is that I was a starving artist in New York City, but I wasn't starving because I got a job working the graveyard shift at an investment bank doing presentation graphics, and it paid really well. So I wasn't a starving artist. I was just an artist in New York. So 9/11 happened and I had just had my first child. My wife and I had just had our first child, and New York City felt unsafe, not because we were attacked, but because of what happened after we were attacked and some of the attitudes that I saw in my place of work, on the streets, et cetera, et cetera. And I felt like it just wasn't a good place. It wasn't a healthy place for me to live or for me and my wife to raise our child. That's when I started thinking about all of the things that I had done, whether it was in temp jobs or even working with different musicians, et cetera, et cetera. I was always pulled towards the teaching side of things,
Mhm.
or actually more accurately, the coaching side of things, right? Like, so, it might be that we're having rehearsal in a band that I'm in and feeling this tug to talk to the keyboard player and say, it feels like this week you're going through something. Like, what's that all about? Like, I'm not your therapist,
Mhm.
but like, maybe we should talk about this, right? And I found myself doing that kind of thing in a lot of places. So after 9/11, I had reached out to some former mentors, and one of my former teachers, his name is Phil Peck, had recently become the head of school at my high school. And so I began talking with him and talking a lot about a lot of the race and xenophobia stuff that was happening in New York. And he said, we've been tossing around the idea of having some kind of diversity coordinator. They didn't even use like DEI, those terms back then.
Right, right.
It was diversity before diversity became a bad word.
Mhm.
And he said, maybe there's a place for you here. So, long story short, we figured it out. And that really began my teaching career where I was sat in an office. And I think the initial idea was that I could be there for some of the black and brown kids that they had recruited and, were on scholarship and all of that stuff. And I co-taught a class with the head of school. And then I began teaching. And that's sort of what, sort of started my teaching career. So it started actually very much in the throes of thinking about a lot of this stuff that I still think about today, belonging and equity and inclusion and all those types of things. But when I struggled to have as much influence as I could, it became clear to me, or at least I thought it was clear at the time, that I needed more authority. I needed more power. I needed to run a division, or I needed to, be an assistant principal, those types of things. And so I began my journey to become a principal. I went back to grad school, got a degree, et cetera, et cetera. And it was interesting. My first principal job was at a school in Northern Virginia. So we moved to the DC area. That's when we moved to the DC area. My wife was very excited because she's from here. And I had all kinds of ideas about what I was going to do at this school. And it's a fairly progressive school. They bill themselves as the progressive option in the area. And so I walk in with dreadlocks and, black man, and everyone was celebrating. It was like, so it was one of the greatest feelings of my life to feel like, yes, I've come home. Finally, I have some ability to make change in the world. Then I started making change maybe a little too fast. And what happened is by the middle of my second year, I was lost. I was getting all this feedback that it's not appropriate that your name is Jago. It's, no one's going to tell me that I should cut my hair, but I didn't match. They thought it was a great idea to have someone who looks like me in the position so that they could tell everybody, look who we have as the principal of our school.
Mhm.
But they still had those old ideas of what a principal looked like, of what a principal acted like, of how a principal spoke. And there became a conflict there pretty quickly. And so my initial reaction was what I often call the death of Jago.
Mhm.
Because okay, yeah, if this is what I want to do with my life, then maybe that's the sacrifice that I need to make. And I began to be more authoritative. I began to be less authentic. I began to try and play that part that members of the board and parents and other folks felt more comfortable with. And I just took a hard left, right, I don't know what it is, and sank down into probably some of the toughest years of my life. Or let's just say the toughest year of my life, because I wasn't being authentic with myself and I lost who I was. And it wasn't until I left that job, treated it like a midlife crisis, moved my whole family to Morocco, et cetera, et cetera. And it's interesting. I don't usually talk about it this way, but that was an important piece of the puzzle, actually,
Mhm.
because moving to Morocco, where I'm not sure everyone looks like me, but I didn't stick out in the same way that I stick out here. I mean, I stuck out as an American, probably, but to be in a place where it's the norm to be brown and to be in a place where the same kinds of norms that people have for a school principal, for example, aren't at play, right? In fact, I was then the model, right? Like my students and the parents who were sending their kids to this school because they wanted to send them to American colleges, just took it for granted. They were like, oh, well, I guess this is what an American teacher, American principal looks like.
Mhm.
And that really helped me find JGo again. And so it's interesting because, my LinkedIn profile says Jason, JGo Gordon, and there's still a little bit of tug between like what's professional and what's authentic.
Mhm.
But yeah, I haven't gone as Jason in 20 years.
Oh, wow.
you know,
Okay.
because it doesn't feel like me. It was the name that was given to me by an abusive person
Mhm.
who I learned some stuff from, but isn't part of my identity now.
Wow. You answered my question and then some. I'm like, wow, but you're a great storyteller. You are a great storyteller. I mean, Morocco, I didn't see that coming. I mean, how did Morocco even get on your radar?
Like I said, I was really depressed after leaving this job and sort of not sure. I mean, I'd spent years and years, went
Yeah.
back to school to got a degree, and I left feeling like I need to do something completely different with my life. And actually, a grad school buddy of mine contacted me. They were teaching at a school in China. And
Oh,
they said, hey, we're looking for a middle school principal. Would you like to apply? I said, yeah, sure. So I got up at like 2 a.m. or something like that to do this Skype interview
Skype.
with this team at this school in China. I
Mhm.
didn't get that job, but it started the wheels turning. And so they have these big fairs every year. There's a couple of organizations that hold these fairs where international school representatives come to a place. There's several hundred teachers and administrators who then go, and you spend the whole day interviewing
Wow.
with various different schools. And my wife, who is also a teacher, she teaches theater. The
Mhm.
challenge was, how do we like match jobs? Like, how do we find jobs at the same school, or at least in the same
A twofer, right?
city? Right, exactly. How do we figure out a twofer? And so there were a couple of options, but one of them was in Casablanca, Morocco. It
What
seemed
was your first reaction when you heard of the opportunity in Casablanca?
my first reaction was the movie where we're like, oh,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
going to be
yeah.
so romantic and
Yeah.
whatever. Casablanca is kind of like, and no disrespect to people who might be, from that part of the country,
Yeah.
but it's kind of like the New Jersey of Morocco.
Why you gotta pick on Jersey?
I'm
Oh
sorry.
my
I'm sorry.
goodness.
But no,
We're
it
so
was
misunderstood. We're
I
so
know, I
misunderstood.
know. In the 70s, it was sort of the business capital. And in many ways it remains that way. The biggest airport is there, but it is a lot of parts of it are kind of run down because people have moved on to Rabat and Marrakesh and other parts of the country that have more tourism and, are sort of upkept more. So it was interesting. We got there and we got there, I think right at the end of Ramadan, which is like everything was kind of dirty because everybody had been kind of, like people work really short hours and that type of thing. And by the end of Ramadan, the whole area is just kind of like, like waiting for people to come back to work and, do the stuff that they normally do. So
Yeah.
we kind of got there. Everything was brown and, dirty and like we couldn't get like the phone hooked up or like all the stuff because it
Right.
was Ramadan. And so we're
Right.
like, oh my God, is this a huge mistake that we made? But within the next couple of weeks, things kind of picked up again, and yeah, it was a culture shock. Our kids were really upset, and we had two kids
Oh,
in ninth grade and fifth grade at the time, and
wow.
yeah, they held it against us for some time.
Wow.
Sure. And it was difficult, like we thought we both had some French. My wife and I both had some French, but French is okay if you're doing business, but most of the people that you interact with every day at the market or even just trying to order a pizza,
Yeah.
they don't speak French, or at least not the French that I learned in school. They speak
Right.
Darija, which is the Moroccan dialect of Arabic. And
Wow.
so it was a whirlwind of learnings
Yeah.
that we experienced. But it
Wow.
was it was amazing. I was so grateful. There's very little crime there, which is wonderful. There are no guns other than in the military. Keep a real tight wrap. And so the number of like murders is tiny, teeny, teeny, tiny.
Yeah.
And as a parent of two brown kids, like it was liberating to
Yeah.
feel like
Mhm.
they're not going to get in trouble because they walked down the wrong street,
Right.
or because they looked at someone in the wrong way. Not that I'm a fearful person,
Right.
but that was really liberating. And the people that we worked with at the school were amazing. At the school, we got all of the Muslim holidays and the American holidays because it was American school.
Yeah.
So it felt like we were always on break.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we traveled to Europe, we traveled to other places in Morocco, we Canary Islands, like we were going all over the place
Yeah.
seeing the most amazing things.
Wow.
And the final thing I say, because I know I've just been kind of rambling on and on.
No, no, this is rich. It's rich, and I think it gives us a fuller appreciation for, your journey. So no, I think this is all very relevant. So thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so the final thing that I'll say is, and I don't know if anybody's written about this. This is my observation of living in Morocco for 2 years. The call to prayer happens 5 times a day. And it's one of the things that I dearly miss. When I was living in Morocco and you would hear it at 5 a.m., didn't miss it then. But now like it's sort of this ceremonious thing that I kind of miss, having because not that everyone takes a break at every call to prayer every day, but there's kind of this reminder that you get every day 5 times to maybe just slow down a little bit. It's not necessarily about whatever deadline you're trying to make or, how you have to be at this place at a certain time because there's something else that is important. And although I am a religious scholar, I'm not currently religious, but the fact that 5 times a day you are asked to reflect on something greater than you, whether that's God or the universe or nature, I think is such an important thing that everyone could benefit from. It helps you to slow down. It helps remind you that there are things that are bigger than you. And so, whatever problems you're having, even though they feel huge to you, you're just one little speck in this entire universe. And I think that was really important to me. Again, I think it was important to our family to experience that. And I think we all took some piece of that away from our experience there.
Yeah.
But it's also helped me in my professional journey to recognize that I'm just one little person doing whatever I can to try and make the world a better place. And
Yeah.
whatever struggles, whatever hurdles that I have, they're just the hurdles and the struggles of one person. And
Yeah.
I can slow down sometimes and be like, okay, let's take a breath and then we'll get back to it.
Yeah. No, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, what would the US be like if there were ringing at certain moments of the day to just be still?
Yeah.
Can't even
Yeah.
imagine. Can't even imagine. Now, I gotta ask this because, I'm the kid who parents saved up and sent one child every summer to Nigeria by themselves, international flight,
Yeah. Right.
before the bells and whistles on flights. And our relatives on that end took
Hmm.
care of me, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
culture shock, they don't get me, I don't get them. But, I remember it was a long trip, not liking it. And then as I started to get older, I realized not everyone got to experience international travel.
Yeah.
And I realized how my context, my outlook was broader because I just took for granted certain things I just knew. And a lot of people, sometimes their experience of me is pretty Americanized, and then they hear that there are other layers to me. So
Yeah.
I got to ask this question about your kids. Did they, over time, have they come to a point where they can see the benefit from the experience? Or
Yeah, I think
are they
so.
still mad and like you shouldn't?
I recognize that it was a very difficult time for them, and they were both sort of in these transitionary periods, like going into middle school, going into high school. And in some ways, like our friends, most of our friends, we had Moroccan friends as well, but the people that we saw every day were the people who worked at the school who were mostly Americans or Canadians or
Oh,
Brits or
expats,
Aussies or,
expats.
expats. And so we spoke English all the time. My kids talk about how even though the instruction language was in English, once that bell rang, it was Darija or French. And so they might even be mid-conversation, and they sometimes describe it as like someone just putting a hand in their face and just being like, "We were talking, and now we're not because I
Right,
don't
right,
understand what you're saying."
right.
So I recognize that was really, really difficult for them. And I hope that they will take those types of experiences and find meaning and understanding from those types of experiences. That
Yeah,
said, they also, as you said, as they've gotten older, I think they really do recognize the benefits that they had to have friends all over the world to actually learn new languages and speak them well, to have just a different experience of what life can be like.
yeah.
My kids would never want to say that like I had any kind of, conscious influence on who they've become as people, but I think they know that we were just trying to do the best for them. They know that I was going through something too, and that this was partially my little midlife crisis,
Yeah,
how that played out, but they always felt loved, and they always felt like we wanted the best for them, and I think they really appreciate some of the experiences, a lot of the experiences,
yeah,
that they had there. My oldest actually just a year ago headed off to Berlin to see a friend that they met in Morocco for a week,
yeah,
just
yeah.
kind of
Still
on a
in
whim,
touch. Still in touch with
Still
friends.
in touch, yeah. So I think they have gotten over the trauma somewhat and can appreciate,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If
what.
anything, at least they have a cool like party story,
Absolutely,
to,
absolutely.
get cool points for sure.
And they both love to travel. I mean, that may be the
Oh,
biggest thing. They
okay,
love to travel.
okay.
Would probably travel constantly if well, maybe not constantly, but they appreciate the ability to meet new people and see
Yeah.
different things. Even in a world where, when I think they were kids and we used to go to these, we used to go on vacation on these breaks that I was talking about, and
Mhm.
they would be like, "Why do I need to go to the Louvre? Like I can look it up online and see the Mona Lisa right there. Like, what's the difference?" And I think a lot of young people kind of feel that way, right? And sometimes I even feel that way, where I'm like, oh yeah, I can kind of see anything that I want to see.
Mhm.
But it's different when you're there and you with other people, and you can smell the air, and you can, feel the temperature, and
Mhm.
all the stuff that go with being in a place. It's why I never like I love music. I'm a musician. I go to as many concerts as possible, and I never do this and like take the
Oh
picture.
yeah.
I occasionally just
Mhm.
to like, but like you see the audience and they're just the whole time they're taking video, and I'm like, when are you watching those videos? When? and they're missing out on the experience of actually being there and enjoying it. It's difficult sometimes because as I'm trying to build this speaking career, I'm just not the type of person who, wants to always be posting, oh, I'm in the airport or I'm doing this
Yeah.
or, like, oh, like
Yeah.
to the crowd, like say hello, like I just because I'm not thinking about that. I'm not
Yeah.
thinking about
Yeah.
documenting my experience. I'm thinking
Yeah.
about living my experience.
Well, and it's so
Um,
it's yeah, it's so interesting you say that. I just had that conversation this week because there are quite a few folks that as they're learning about me being more vocal and using my voice, I'm realizing that, I guess they're not used to hearing me open up this much. So, but growing up in New Jersey without the internet, this is back in, I was born in 73, so in high school in the late 80s.
Same, born in 73.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, at least in the Northeast, just like telling your business just for fun, like just talking, like I don't know that that's built into, or it wasn't built into the New Jersey experience.
Yeah.
Just start
Yeah.
talking and telling your business for nothing. So as I've started to lean into, just my message, my story, what I want to say, and even build this new path for myself. It's like I've had to get okay with that,
Mm,
But for me, I still tell myself, I'm sharing with some sort of purpose. It's not just, just talking freely, just
right.
randomly.
Right.
But it's still something to get used to. I think social media and just the rigor to it, it's something to get used to. It's something
It
to get
is.
used to.
It is
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure.
You've been an educator, principal, strategist, performer, and I'm just trying to think of what's the through line for you
Hmm.
across all these different chapters. I mean, you even talked about Morocco. It sounds like Morocco was a major period in your life. You came out
Yeah.
on the other side. I guess what can you share about all those different roles and how it played a role in the different chapters you've had and even arriving on the other side after Morocco?
Yeah. I mean, I think the shift there really was working with kids to working with adults.
Oh, okay.
So, for most of my teaching career, I had this idea initially that I was going to give support to all the Black and brown kids, unlike the support that I didn't get when
Hmm.
I was in school, right? That was kind of my mission. And then I realized, working with all kinds of kids, that the white kids needed support too, and the
Yeah,
international kids needed
right,
support as well. And
right, right.
actually, to be a person of color, to be a Black man in this space, especially in a lot of the private schools that I worked with, I might be the only person of color that this student had met throughout their entire schooling. And that became a really important part of my identity, to show them that not all people are like the people that they grew up with. And so that was kind of taken to the extreme when we moved to Morocco, because now I had all these like Moroccan kids and they're so culturally different. But I figured out how to connect with them just as easily as I connected with other kids. And then I think realized, coming back from Morocco, that in some ways working with kids is easy because they're so hungry to learn new stuff and so impressionable. I do think it's getting harder with social media and like kids thinking that they've got the whole world at their fingertips, when really they're just being given a tiny slice of the world that the algorithm feeds them. That's a whole other topic that
Right.
we
It's
don't
all
need to get
about it's all
into.
about the algorithm. Yeah.
Right. But coming back, and basically I came back and took a job working with principals on how to be better principals. And I know, like, to all my teacher friends out there, yes, it's a impossible job at times. But when you're working with adults who have become set in their ways over years and years and years and years, it's exponentially
Oh,
harder.
yeah.
The great thing is that at some point, I think adults, especially when they hit like their 40, and not that it can't happen in your 20s or 30s, they become aware that the patterns that they have created for themselves aren't necessarily serving them anymore. You know a ton about this. And so when you get them at those moments where you can say, you know what, let's try a little something different. You don't have to change the entire way that you lead your division or that you do your job. Let's just work on something small. Let's see if we can make it more authentic. Let's see if we can make it more compassionate. Let's see if we can tune what you see to be more equitable with the people that you work with. And if I can do that, then it opens them up to a whole new world of thinking about the patterns that they're in and how they can change them. right? Like, why not? There's
Yeah.
nothing stopping me. I don't even have parents anymore who are like, no, you can't do this.
Right.
You got to be home at this time and you've got to get into this college or you've got to do this or that. For the most part, you're an adult
Yeah.
and you can do what you want to do. And so that's kind of been the shift, I think, for me, where I've had a lot of time with young people trying to inspire them, trying to see that they can follow their own paths. And now I'm on the other side of things where I mostly work with adults,
Mhm.
trying to get them to see that they can also follow their own paths and that they
Yeah.
can create the lives that they want to live and do things the way that they want to do things in spite of all the stuff they think they've learned up to that point. Not to discredit the stuff that they've learned,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
sometimes it makes sense to take a look back and see what's serving me and what's not serving me.
Well, yeah. Well, and the audience is shifting and changing in front of you.
Yeah,
So that's the
absolutely.
end user you have to better understand. But, I wonder, everyone's different, right? Every principal is different, every teacher is different. But if they have come to you with 20 years behind them, was there any pattern you noticed as a way to get them to see the opportunity? Like, how do you even get through to someone's listening? They're the head person for the most part.
Yeah.
They do all the checking, you know,
Yeah.
and they can get away with just being unchecked, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so do you recall like whether there was a pattern or any theme around helping them see this possibility to try something new, or was it just different for every single person?
Well, I think the pattern really, and this is why I'm focused currently on belonging,
Hmm.
is, I mean, you hear all the time that we're in an epidemic of loneliness. And that's because whether you're, CEO of a company or you're low person on the totem pole, you need belonging. You need to feel like other people are going to be there to support you. And it can be really difficult to do that in this world. And so I see that same thing regardless of who I talk to. And so that's where I often start. That's the inroads for me, is to say, where do you belong? And often people are like, well, I don't know. I've never even thought about that. Like, what do you mean? And I'm like, where do you feel like you belong? A lot of times they talk about where they fit in, like, oh, well, I go to this conference every year and it's all the heads of, blah, blah, blah. Great. That's a start. Do you feel like you belong there? Or do you walk in a room and kind of look around and be like, oh, shoot, I should have dressed differently, or I don't know if I should talk to those people. And I'm not trying, I'm not
Yeah.
saying that those are unnatural feelings. Those are very, very natural feelings. What you want to do is you want to try and find those people, those spaces that you really do feel like you can take a deep breath. And that kind of levels the playing field, right? Because everyone has that need and everyone feels like that's what they would really like. And if you can crack that nut, then you're not going to feel as lonely anymore.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so whether your goals are to try and, make billions of dollars or lead this foundation to whatever goals it has, it's going to come down your personal life to, in many ways, whether you feel like you belong, because your belonging leads to your self-esteem, and your self-esteem leads to all the stuff that you would like to be, your happiness, your creativity, your ability to feel like you're doing good things in the world, right? Everybody wants that. Even, it's interesting. I posted a little while ago on social channels and it got banned because I guess I used some of the wrong words. But even some of the people in our administration, like if I had the chance to sit down with them and they would really listen to me, I mean, that might be the problem, but if they would really listen to me, I would talk to them about belonging. You're the president of the United States of America, or you're the richest man in the world. Do you feel like you belong? Tell me about that. Because I'd be willing to bet you that if they really sat down and thought about it, they're not particularly elevated when it
Mhm.
comes to belonging. And that's
Yeah.
probably actually a lot of the reason that they're in the position that they're in right now, because
Interesting.
they're trying to compensate for the fact that they don't understand why they don't feel good in all of these places. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm making awfully lofty claims here, but I
Yeah.
believe that it's true. I really believe that part of why they are making decisions that do not take into account
Oh,
millions of
yeah.
lives of people
Yeah.
is because they don't feel like they belong to our world. And I feel like if we
Yeah.
could fix that,
Yeah.
it would help.
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. I mean, if you don't feel that true sense of belonging, then there's not an appreciation for it.
Right?
And so you can make decisions in the absence of belonging, right?
Exactly.
I mean, but even as you were talking, I was just thinking to myself, where do I feel the most at home? Is it safe to look at belonging that way?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I often like the way I often describe it is so people often ask me what's the difference between inclusion and belonging. Inclusion is having a seat at the table. Belonging is getting to that seat and the host has made you all your favorite foods.
oh, oh yeah. So when you share that analogy or metaphor, like honestly, I don't know that there have been too many times where I felt like I belonged, but I move forward anyway.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
So I mean, I think so. I grew up as Jehovah's Witness. Clearly everyone's going right. I'm going left. I'm not anymore, but still that shaped
Mhm.
like, oh, everyone's doing this, you need to do that. And then my name,
Mhm.
okay,
Mhm.
everyone's, name is like this. You can't find a keychain at Six Flags with your name on it. So,
Yeah.
so I think, but, I think, even from some of the trauma I've dealt with too, and
Mhm.
abuse was a part of my background as well. It's not something everyone could understand if they've not gone through it. And so I think at a certain point, I got okay
Mhm.
with not belonging. And I stopped, I didn't make it wrong. It just, is what
Right.
it is.
Right.
But now when I think about where I feel most welcome and most at home and most loved, it's outside.
Mm.
It's outside.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm surrounded by God's love and
Mhm.
it's just nature. It's just innocent and just beautiful and just there, to support you. And so I don't know if that's the same context of how you describe belonging, but it was just something that I thought of as you were talking. So,
I, I think that absolutely is the same thing that I'm talking about. Whether it's outdoors or whether it's doing an activity that you love doing,
yeah,
whether it's, going to the coffee shop and there's that one barista who always gets your name right or,
yeah, yeah,
like there's a lot of times there's very little things where
yeah.
you kind of get a glimpse of belonging.
No, you're right.
And
You're right.
so my goal and what I try and help people do is to try and find those little places so that they can get more of them, right? Like we're not always going to like constantly feel belonging, right?
Right.
Conflict is a part of our lives. Change is
Right.
always going to be a part of our lives. There's always going to be things there where you feel uncomfortable or uncertain or unsure of
Right.
yourself.
Mhm.
All of that stuff is completely natural. So I'm not saying that like, the goal is to have 24/7 you're just belonging because then, maybe you don't grow. But you can begin to search for belonging and search for
Yeah.
healthy belonging because I feel like a lot of times people try to feed you belonging and it's not healthy necessarily. But I think that if you start to find those places that really resonate with you and make you feel like you can be authentically you, then you learn to increase those moments. You learn to say no to some of those moments that maybe don't matter as much and don't make you feel like you belong. So why am I doing that?
Mhm.
Or why am I in that place? And you
Mhm.
begin to incorporate more of those places where you're like, yeah, you know what? Like, I don't know, every time I go to this restaurant, I just feel really well taken care of.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
going to go to that I don't care. Maybe that's the only restaurant I go to.
Right. Right.
Right.
Right.
But because that's what feeds
I
me and that's
see.
what nourishes me and
Okay.
helps me be the best person that I can be.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Because there are moments like that. And I'll be honest, they kind of surprise me a little bit when
Mm.
people show you so much love without an agenda.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, and I don't know if that's the Jersey in me or Nigeria in me, like, there's no agenda here, and you're just being so sugary sweet. What is that
Yeah.
about? It does catch me off guard, but it really touches and moves me when I do see it. And you're right, you see it in different ways, whether
Mhm.
it's Chick-fil-A or,
And,
just,
and and then you start flipping it around, right? Where you start offering
yeah,
that kind of belonging to other
yeah,
people.
yeah,
And it feels just as good, if not better,
yeah,
when you don't have an agenda and you just do something nice for
yeah,
somebody.
yeah,
Even the smallest things, even just walking down the street and smiling at someone. Like I grew up
yeah,
learning to not look anybody in the eyes. And sometimes I'll walk down the street and I'll look at somebody and they're like taken off guard, like, why are you looking at me? I'm just saying hello, brother.
Right, right, right,
You
right.
know? And
No,
it feels good for me to offer that to someone, and I know it feels good to them.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, it made me think. So there's, something I posted something this week promoting the podcast, and I started off with who would we be in this world if
Mm,
we were all aware of our patterns? It's like, some of the conversation we're having now around politics and all, who would we be if that's who we were in the middle of debates, in the middle of conversations that were tense? Who would we be? And then even as you brought up belonging, it's like I was thinking of who would we be or who would I be even if I was exposed to much more belonging,
mm,
you know?
mhm.
And I've been exposed to some for sure. I mean, I feel like that's who our coaches were for us, right?
Absolutely.
But I mean, if there was more of that, oh my goodness, and it tears me up just thinking
Mhm.
about it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
what does success look like when you think about belonging and what you're trying to bring to your audiences?
Yeah, success to me is when other people feel belonging, like very,
Mm.
very simply. Like when I get up on stage and I speak to a crowd, no matter whether it's just a couple people or whether it's thousands of people, my goal is always to try and connect with everybody in the room. And a lot of people say, well, how do you connect with 1,000 people in a room? The answer is in much the same way, like you really try and understand, you try and read the room, as they say,
Mhm.
and you look for the head nods,
Mhm.
and you feel the energy really, like you can feel when people are there with you. And it's interesting, I've been a performer for a long time, and I used to think that when I got up on stage and I grabbed the mic and I sang some songs, that it was about my vocal acrobatics or, like my smooth voice or whatever it was, right?
The
I was like,
locks.
oh, I
People love the
like,
locks. They love them.
right. It, and now I realize, so I had a opportunity recently to sing with one of my college groups, and we did a performance for a couple hundred people in a restaurant actually. It was like,
I saw the
it was
recording.
it was an
I
event. Yeah,
saw
you
the
yeah,
recording.
you saw
Yeah.
it. And like ordinarily, like back in college, I would have been totally focused here, right? Like are my runs on point? Am I hitting the right pitch? Am I, all that stuff? And now I'm completely out here and I'm trying to catch people's eyes and I'm trying to read the room and I'm trying to feel the energy and I'm trying to create a space by understanding the space that I'm in, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's my life goal, really, to
Mhm.
just try and be that for other people because I know that if I can give that kind of experience, whether it's through music or through speaking or through coaching or MC, whatever it is I'm doing, if I can give an experience where people feel belonging, that's all I need. That's
Yeah.
success to me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. And belonging, I know, is the focal point of a lot of your content, but storytelling at the same time is a big part of how you express. So
Yeah.
it seems like it's at the center of your work. And I think it's a deep human need, to be quite honest. Storytelling, it helps us get closer to each other. What do you think people most misunderstand about just storytelling and its power?
I mean, storytelling is the human vehicle for communication, right? So if you're not human, you may communicate with sounds or gestures or whatever it is, but as humans, we understand that we have a past and that we have a future. And storytelling is really a way to connect the past to the present and the future. Because for whatever reason, we think as humans that's important. And for better or for worse, I think it really is important, that we understand so that we can learn from our mistakes,
Mhm.
so that we can understand not just the basics of, hey, everybody, something's coming. There's danger. We need to get
Mhm.
out of here, or hey, look, there's food over there and we should go get it. Right? Like that's sort of where a lot of animals live. And we are in a space where really the only way that we have been able to communicate well enough to make all of the technological advances that we've made, to create spaces of community that are quite large.
Mhm.
All of that is because of storytelling, because we're able to say, this happened, it made me feel some kind of way, and now I want to feel different than that.
Mm.
So let me explain to myself how I can get from there to here,
Yeah.
or let me explain to other people how we can get from there to here.
Mhm.
So yeah, storytelling is paramount
Yeah.
with regard to people understanding how to live their best lives, for sure.
I want to talk about written out loud, that venture.
Yeah, sure.
Before I touch on that, I wanted to ask you that piece that we just got through talking about with belonging, like,
Mhm.
that part of the conversation. When you think about the role we have as leaders to be effective with ourselves and our teams, what role should belonging play in that dynamic?
As a leader, I feel like that is center to what I want my team to feel. I want them to feel belonging. And if you've heard me speak, I often talk about my cheat code to belonging,
Mhm.
which is compassion, high expectations, equity, authenticity, and trust. And those are the five key components that you want to have on your team or in the group of people that you're leading, that will help them to feel belonging. And a lot of the stuff that we've talked about throughout this conversation has sort of pointed in that direction where, you want to be able to have compassion for the people that you're with, regardless of whether you're senior
Yeah.
to them or junior to them. And, like we're all human beings, we all go through stuff. I want you to know that I understand that and that I feel that in some ways. High expectations is the idea that you are hired to do this job. And so I believe you can do the job, right? In fact, I believe that you can be the best person at doing this job. That's why I hired you,
Mhm.
right? But often it's the opposite, right? Where it's like, oh, well, you got to sort of earn your place in the company, and I'm not sure whether or not you can do this. So, yep, you're here, like do it. I think you're the best, and I expect you to prove it to me.
Right.
Nobody wants to feel like like they have low expectations or from somebody that, from their boss or whatever, right? It's one of the things you talked about, the written out loud program that we started a couple years ago, and that's one of the huge principles that we have there. And that's actually taken from a study that was done by the New Teachers Project a bunch of years ago that showed that high expectations is actually one of the largest, if not the largest, motivator of kids in schools. So if you find yourself in the fifth grade and for whatever reason you're still reading at a second grade level, if the teacher gives you a second grade text, you're not going to get anywhere. And so having that high expectation to say, like, hey, I don't know why you didn't get that reading thing done in the second or third or fourth grade, but like you're in fifth grade now. So like here's some fifth grade reading. And step number three, equity. I'm going to give you the supports. It doesn't matter whether this person next to you is reading at a seventh grade level or whatever. I will give you the supports that you need so that you can live up to the high expectations that I have of you to
Wow.
read at a fifth grade level,
Wow.
right? That allows them to be more authentic. It allows me to be more authentic. And then trust becomes the center of that relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it feels like you're not in it alone and the
Exactly.
person's there to support you. They have your back. Yeah. No, I don't
Exactly.
hear many conversations like that. Like, I need this by this date. You good? All right.
I know it's a completely different way of thinking about things. I don't know what my capacity will be to change people's lives in this way on a grand scale, but that's my mission. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
to spread that type of behavior and relationships everywhere I go.
Okay. No, thank you for
Yeah.
that. Thank you for that. So let's talk about the written out loud venture. You're
Yeah.
helping people, especially young people, own their narratives and build something with their voice. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a program that we started actually during the pandemic, right at the beginning of the pandemic,
Uh-huh.
when a lot of schools were forced to do like emergency remote learning, right? Online classes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody hated it. The kids hated it. The teachers hated it. The parents hated it. Nobody liked it. And what we did is we said, okay, well, let's create spaces where kids feel belonging. Because in those school situations, that wasn't the case, right? It was like, okay, well, you better show up to this time on Zoom, and then I'm going to send you homework over email, and you better get it done.
Oh,
And that's it. And we said, in the same way that kids feel those moments of belonging at school, whether that's hanging out in the lunchroom or with that favorite teacher that they had, but not because they're learning math, but because they go up to that teacher after class and said, "Oh my God, guess what happened to me, the other day, blah, blah, blah." And they build that trusting relationship with the teacher. Or whether it's even, passing notes to your friend. I don't know if kids pass notes anymore. They probably just,
I know. Do
send
they?
texts.
Yeah. Right.
Texts. But but it's that type of thing that we said that's what's missing. That's why kids are not, they don't want to show up to these Zoom meetings. Their cameras are off, their audio is off. They're doing everything they can to try and not have to be there because the most important things about school were suddenly stripped away. And so we basically just said, let's put that back in. And that was like, yes, we put them in small groups and we teach them about storycraft and we have them collaboratively co-author stories that we then publish. They're available on Amazon and all that stuff. That's like the high expectations part, right? Like, guess what? You showed up to this class, you're going to write a book, a real book, a published book that you're going to show your friends is available on Amazon, right?
Wow.
That's the high expectations part. But really, it was all about belonging. Let's create a space where kids want to be. And if kids want to be there, they're going to learn. They're going to feel that hunger to do something because that's what all humans feel. And so that's really the power of our program and why, so we have a contract with Newark Public Schools
Oh, in New
in
Jersey?
New Jersey.
Okay.
And currently, we're actually, everyone in the fourth grade goes through our program now.
Hmm.
But when we just began and we were trying to navigate where this was going to fit in, like, the folks that we're talking to were like, "Oh, we think this is great. We think it's awesome that these kids are going to write books and all of this stuff. Let's do it after school." So, we did an after school thing and then we did that in the fall. And then we said, "Hey, these kids are making excellent progress. Let's continue to do it throughout the spring." Well, in the spring, they've got to do test prep because
Hmm.
we got to make sure that we get the funding from the state because our kids are performing at grade level.
Yeah.
And the irony there is that having the kids in our program is exactly the type of thing that are going to help the kids to perform better because they want to be there. They're going to show up. They're using their minds. They're interacting with the other kids in the classroom to try and tell these stories that they can all relate to. And there's so much learning that happens there. Even vocabulary, right? Like they will give kids a list of 20 vocabulary words and say, "Learn these vocabulary words, and I'm going to test you on them tomorrow." Kids typically don't do very well trying to memorize lists of vocabulary words.
Hmm. Hmm.
But when you get a bunch of kids together and you challenge them to use words that they think their fellow classmates might not know, then guess what happens? They look up new words on their own. They come, they read their story, and they say, the point is that it was obsolete. And the other kids are like, "Obsolete what?" Well, let me tell you what obsolete means because I learned it last night. I looked it up.
Hmm.
Now, all the kids know what obsolete means.
Right.
I don't know why I picked that word obsolete. Maybe
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like that other kind of learning is obsolete, but that's, it's those types of things. It's very, very unconventional. It's
Hmm.
very new types of learning, but it really focuses in on the core of what it means to be human. It focuses in on storytelling, like we talked about. We create an environment of belonging where these kids feel like they want to learn. And that's really kind of the magic.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And how do you stay grounded when you're building something new like that? It's like no blueprint and you're just trying to figure it out, twists and turns. Not sure if places like Newark just kind of raised their hand and jumped for the opportunity. Like, how do you stay grounded?
Yeah, it's been difficult, if I'm being honest. I mean,
Mhm.
we are trying to disrupt the system,
Mhm.
and that can be very, very difficult. I mean, if you look at, whatever great companies who have disrupted the system,
Right,
it
right,
it, it wasn't easy and it
right.
takes time.
Yeah, yeah.
But, we're here to try and help anybody on that journey. And the great thing is in places like Newark, we're seeing some pretty amazing results. And
That's great.
hopefully as those results get out into the rest of the world, there will be people who will take risks, districts that will take risks
Nice.
on
Nice.
doing this type of thing instead of the often myopic view of just like, well, we got to get them ready for the test.
Right.
Okay, sure. But how are you doing that? And if it didn't work last year, why do you think it's going to work this year?
Right. Right.
So something about insanity and doing
Right.
different
Right. Right.
things, expecting
Exactly.
different results,
Exactly.
right? Like it's that type of thing. And so, I mean, I've always been someone who believes in learning new things and in change and in trying new things. My friends will joke about how I will try anything. I'm like Mikey from the commercial, or maybe he doesn't
Might
like
be
everything.
right.
I don't
Right.
know.
Right.
Whatever it was, like, you've got like grasshopper tacos. Oh yeah, I bet JGo will try those. Like it's that type of thing because
Okay.
what I know and what I kind of learned early on, like we talked about in the beginning of the conversation, where I was just trying everything just to try and get out of a bad
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
I learned that trying new things is the best way to get to the best answer.
Yeah. Figuring it out. Yeah.
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 And so that's what we're asking schools to do. That's what I ask executives to do when I talk to them or when I coach them
Yeah.
to try some new things. What are the patterns that haven't been serving you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you can't even answer that question,
I
that's
know.
okay.
Yeah.
Try something new and see what happens.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love
Hmm.
that. Okay, so we're going to do like a quick lightning round.
Okay.
It's meant to be fun. It's
All
a
right.
game called Pattern Check.
I'm
And
ready.
so, really, I just want you to respond with the first thing that comes to mind. So I'm going to give you the option of two words, and I want you to pick the word that you're drawn to or you feel is more like you, and then explain why. Okay,
Okay.
that's it.
Great.
So first is structure or flow.
Flow.
Flow. Okay.
Absolutely flow.
Okay.
Um, I've just always been a person who wants to go with the flow, not in a sense of like trying to fit in and not make waves,
Mhm.
but who can read the situation and get energy from whatever it is that's happening.
Yeah.
And obviously, as a musician and as an athlete, that's what we're always striving for, right? We
Mhm.
want to get to that place where there is no thought and you're just, you're
In the
doing
zone.
your thing
Mhm.
and you're completely in that flow state.
Nice. Okay. Leading from the front or behind the scenes?
I'm going to say behind the scenes,
Hmm.
and that is a new thing for me. I think that I used to feel like I had to be out in the front because I had figured out a bunch of stuff and I knew how the world works and all this stuff. But the more experience I get, like I said, my strength comes with from whoever I'm working with.
Yeah.
And so if I can be truly behind the scenes, that's what success looks like. I don't need to be up front. In fact, my goal should be not having to be out in front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, same with me. I think I'm at a point in life where I'm looking to lean into the meaning of my name. So I'm trying to add to
Mm,
the greatness so other people
mm,
can be elevated in some way. Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Finish the sentence. When I teach, I feel blank.
When I teach, I feel valuable.
Valuable. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I feel like most people want to add some sort of value to the world. And teaching is something that has, for whatever reason, always come natural to me and I enjoy doing it. And it makes me feel worthy. It makes me feel
Mhm.
valuable when I do that, like I'm contributing.
Yeah. Okay. Books, podcasts, or live theater.
Live theater.
Okay. I figured you were gonna say that. I figured you were gonna
Although
say
although my wife would probably tell you I would say podcasts.
that. Okay. Okay.
I
Okay.
can't, like I'm like, oh, I listened to a podcast the other day, and she's like, okay, yeah, I know. Tell me what they said on the podcast.
Right. Right. Right.
So of all three forms of media, I probably digest the most podcasts.
Yeah.
But if I have a choice, live theater all the way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to go to so much of the theater because it ends up being like a every now and a every
Yes,
now and then thing. More time or more freedom?
more freedom.
More freedom. Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially at our age, time's limited, and
Yeah.
and I do feel like a lot of, like there's all these like tech billionaires who are like, oh, we're gonna figure out how to live forever and all that stuff. But my question to them is, are you living forever, or is it just the forever part that you're chasing? Freedom is one of those words, I think, as an African American person in this country that,
Mhm.
that hits a little bit different than a lot of
Mhm.
other words.
Mhm.
And so there's something that's really deep down inside of me that gravitates to that word and wants that word to be something that I feel like is part of my life. And especially these days, I feel like the world is like closing in and trying to limit the amount of freedom that I have. So, absolutely. If I could make more freedom, significantly more freedom in the world, I would give up all the rest of the time I have.
Yeah, no, freedom is it's a powerful thing and it's very easy to take it for granted until
Mhm.
you start to see
Yeah,
it start to shift.
absolutely.
It's like, oh, wait, what's going on? So no, thank you, Jago. So you shared so much wisdom with us, but I want to end with this. What's one pattern, personal or professional, that you've chosen to keep because it still nourishes you today?
Asking for help.
Mm, hmm.
Yeah, I think it's something that I have struggled with as an African American,
Yeah.
as someone who grew up in this tradition of Black excellence,
Mhm.
where a lot of my coaches and teachers said things to me like, "Look, because of who you are, you're going to have to work twice as hard." And I took that to heart. And I think that it's really, really important to ask for help
Yeah.
because people will be willing to give it. And like I always say, like connection is the foundation of being human, right? We are pack animals. We don't survive on our own, right? If you're born and your mother abandons you, you die.
Mm.
And I feel like in this individualistic society that we live in, we make it really difficult. And as a man as well, we make it really difficult for people to ask for help. And when I began to figure out that that is an important thing to do and developed that pattern of knowing when I need help and when to ask for it, I will never give that up.
Yeah, yeah. No, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. I love that. Jago, this was such a rich, thoughtful conversation. You truly live beyond the pattern, not by rejecting structure, but by weaving something more expansive, inclusive, and alive. Thank you so much for being on the show. For anyone listening who wants to learn more or bring you into their space to speak, teach, or collaborate, let's just remind them where they can find you.
Yeah, www.jagospeaks.com. That's where you can find all my socials, all my information, and you can get in touch with me. I would love to talk more with you about belonging and see where we go.
Awesome, awesome. So that's it for today's episode, everyone. Let this be your reminder. Sometimes the most transformational pattern isn't one we break, but one we create, one where our curiosity, our courage, and our story can live side by side. This is Beyond the Pattern. Until next time, stay grounded, stay open, and keep leading with heart. All right, have a good week, everybody. Thanks. If this episode resonated, I'd love to hear from you. You can text or leave a voicemail at 404-828-0279. That's 404-828-0279. Or you can visit me at bukalaogintala.com to send in a question, share your story, or explore coaching and speaking services. Whether you're leading a team or learning to lead yourself, I'm honored to be on this journey with you. And if you haven't already, hit follow or subscribe so we can keep growing together.